Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan. I'm the mind behind Make More Capital, and today we're coming at you with This Week in Cannabis News from May 22nd to the 28th. Now, before we jump in, if you enjoyed this video or you learned something, please just leave a like on it as it really helps out my channel. And of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, subscribe below so that you don't miss any future videos. And there's plenty of content for you to go back, rewatch, and educate yourself with. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place so that you can watch episodes over time to learn about the evolution of the industry, identify top companies that you keep seeing pop up that you think will be worth a lot more in the future than they are now, and take advantage whenever you feel ready if you wish to do so. We're going to start with this one from MJ Biz Daily. It's an opinion piece: what Main Street operators need to know about rescheduling or descheduling cannabis. And while it is a well-written piece that highlights the best case scenarios we're hopeful for, it just seems kind of silly to think that operators wouldn't be aware of this before they get into business, because obviously this has a massive impact. And plus, I just don't know what he means by Main Street operators. I'm assuming it's legal operators, but he doesn't necessarily clarify. So just wanted to point that out. But for those of you that aren't aware, last fall, President Joe Biden called on the leaders of the U.S. Departments of Justice and Health and Human Services to review expeditiously or quickly how cannabis is scheduled. Sadly, that hasn't happened quickly, but the president's move also emphasized the need for policy reform that would benefit smaller, independent cannabis businesses, not just multi-state operators and other large, deep-pocketed companies. And you imagine, though, any move that goes to help one does end up helping the other. But main thing to highlight is that if we were to get cannabis descheduled completely or rescheduled to a Schedule 3, there'd be no more predatory 280E tax, and that would be huge, again, for the big operators, but also for the small mom-and-pop social equity entrepreneurs that are suffocating the most. And so just to highlight, we know descheduling is the key to responsible federal cannabis reform. By descheduling cannabis, cannabis is no longer illegal. It becomes legal overnight. Less reason for cops to go arrest and less reason for cops to use resources, which you'd think would help reduce arrests overall, as there's less reason to target for anything cannabis related. Plus, it would help facilitate expungements at the federal level, half of what Biden promised during this large announcement. So just to give you some context, by descheduling cannabis and placing it under the purview of the Alcohol and Tobacco Tax and Trade Bureau, cannabis could be regulated similar to alcohol, better than it is now, and you'd hope that along with this we'd get home grow so people can grow at home. Unlike tasking the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, we don't want the FDA oversighting this, cannabis would be logical and better fit for the TTB because it's already equipped to deal with regulating consumer packaged goods, while rescheduling cannabis from Schedule 1 to 2 would be the worst case scenario because it, again, makes cannabis seem like something that's not a medicine, which is obviously false at this point. And then lastly, to highlight, moving cannabis to Schedule 3, on the other hand, would have the advantage of removing cannabis from the draconian and poorly applied Section 280E of the Internal Revenue Code. And so, huge to think descheduling and Schedule 3 would remove 280E and we wouldn't need SAFE. Right? And so that's a big thing to consider because then these companies would be making profits for themselves and shareholders like us and not for the government, which they currently are with 280E. And so infuriating. A little bit more down here if you wanted to pause read so you don't have to grab the full thing. Otherwise, of course, the need to deschedule cannabis. That is what we want first and foremost so we can get it back, and then home grow should come with this, no ifs, ands, or buts. And so with that, just to highlight from Weed Street Jesus, an ironic meme, live look at our government agencies fast-tracking transhumanism, and I don't know if you heard of the FDA approving Neuralink for its first trial, but imagine, they want to fast track this, and while there could be a lot of pros, no doubt, we also can understand over the last few years that there could also be a lot of cons, especially if you're not controlling the Neuralink that's controlling you. Instead of doing what 91% of Americans want and freeing the planet. So you can't make this shit up. The times we're living in are strange. The corruption knows no limits. And the worst part about this is just, you know that the FDA is not even sweating. You'd think that they would be, but they're not, sadly. So we keep fighting the good fight to get the truth about this plant out there, because the last thing I want is a fucking chip put in my brain. And with that from Normal, to make it easy, if you haven't yet, please consider, folks, tell your senators to support the Safe Banking Act. They're 526 letters short of their goal, and obviously now is the time to try and add the momentum. And so if you wouldn't mind just putting your info in, write a short, quick note saying it'll make America safer, getting cash off the streets. It'll reduce deaths from these dispensaries no longer being targets for armed robberies, and it will finally reduce the discrimination towards this industry for dealing with a plant that happens to be a safer, non-addictive medicinal alternative than the opioid epidemic that killed over 100,000 Americans last year. And so lots of good reasons to support this. And of course, we want to follow science, not the political science. And so that's why I bring you some studies, and to touch on this one, Parkinsonism and related disorders, long-term safety of medical cannabis in Parkinson's disease, a retrospective case control study as of May 4th, 2023. You can pause to read the highlights here, but essentially just want to bring you down to the juice. Also, you can pause to read the background methods and results. But in conclusion, over the 1 to 3 years of follow-ups, the medical cannabis treatment regimens appear to be safe. You can't claim that after 3 years that they are safe based on the data you've collected. Medical cannabis did not exacerbate neuropsychiatric symptoms and had no detrimental effects on disease progression. Yet, all they can say is it appeared to be safe. Why are they writing this in past tense when it's like over 3 years of follow-ups? medical cannabis is safe. So just infuriating, but again, highlighting that the science doesn't lie when we actually look at it. This one from Wiley Online Library, Assessment of Clinical Outcomes in Patients with Fibromyalgia. This one from May 18th, 2023, an analysis from the UK Medical Cannabis Registry. And of course, all the links for these studies will be in the description if you wanted to go through them. Funding information, there's no external or commercial funding associated with this paper. Fair enough. Seems like less reason for them to have some interesting responses that wouldn't line up with other studies. But with that, in conclusion, cannabis-based medicinal products was associated with improvements in fibromyalgia-specific symptoms, in addition to sleep, anxiety, and health-related quality of life. Those who reported prior cannabis use appeared to have a greater response. Counterintuitive, ironic, but awesome. CBMPs were generally well tolerated. These results must be interpreted within the limitations of study design, no doubt. But again, seems like cannabis is more of a medicine than something that is too addictive to be prescribed. Hence, putting it in the Schedule 1 where it doesn't belong right now. Well, we got another one from Plus One. Cannabis use is inversely associated with liver steatosis detected by transient yada yada yada. But this one's from May 18, 2023, essentially to highlight that a total of 2,622 participants were included in the study. The proportions of never cannabis users, past users, and current users were 45.9%, 35%, and 19.1% respectively. Compared to never cannabis users, past and current users had a lower prevalence of liver steatosis, which is fatty liver disease, I believe. And so imagine that. Compared to never cannabis users, past and current users had lower prevalence to fatty liver disease. And in the alcohol intake adjusted model, current cannabis use was an independent predictor of a low prevalence for fatty liver disease in people with non-heavy alcohol intake. So if you're using cannabis and you don't drink a lot of alcohol, it is an independent predictor of low prevalence. So you cannot make this shit up. And in conclusion, while it is a small study and because bigger studies require more money and it's hard to get funding for cannabis studies, in this nationally representative sample, current cannabis use is inversely associated with fatty liver disease. And from my understanding, something inversely associated means cannabis use causes fatty liver disease to go down. If you get anything different, do let me know in the comments if I'm wrong, but the pathophysiology is unclear, needs further study. No doubt, descheduling will help us get that study, or get that data, I should say. No significant association was established between cannabis use and liver fibrosis, irrespective of past or current use. And so very fascinating. Again, links in the description. And a few more while we're at it. From Green Market Report, cannabis can help dead bedroom syndrome, apparently. And no doubt, there's this recent stat where it's like 80 million or 90 million Americans might be on prescription medication of some sort. And no doubt that probably has an effect on your sex drive. And ironically enough, potential solution, CBD and hemp specialist Nature and Bloom discovered Google searches for dead bedroom have increased by 170% over the last 3 months. And dead bedroom just means couples not having sex, if you didn't read this part yet, suggesting a lot of American couples are frustrated by a sudden lack of sexual intimacy. They suggest cannabis could be the answer for a dead bedroom. It'll certainly help, but you got a lot of work to do if that's unfortunately the issue you found yourself in. But stress reduction, obviously cannabis can be helpful in the mood. And then a little bit more just on search injury and 10 states most concerned about their sex life. Of course, it's the lefty states of California and New York. And so full link if you wanted to grab the article to read through the whole thing. But with that, another one, study, occasional cannabis use associated with better cognitive function in older adults. May 25th, 2023, fascinating. And again, a very small sample study, but older adults with a history of occasional cannabis consumption exhibit greater cognitive performance than do non-users, according to longitudinal data published in the Journal of AIDS and Behavior. So get this, pause to read any bit that I don't highlight, but the study's authors determined that those with a history of occasional use perform best out of the three groups. They further acknowledged that frequent cannabis use was not associated with any decline in cognitive performance over the study period. Get the fuck out, right? Counterintuitive, but data doesn't lie. Authors report in a longitudinal, well-characterized cohort of older adults with HIV, we found that occasional cannabis use in later life was associated with better overall global cognition compared to no cannabis use, a potentially important finding given this population's increased vulnerability to cognitive impairment. Further, frequent cannabis use did not relate to worse global cognition over study follow-up, and suggesting that cannabis use within the ranges observed in the study is not a risk factor for early decline in any cognitive domain. And so more here if you wanted to pause to read their conclusions, but fascinating and again, counterintuitive, probably not what a lot of people expected. I just wanted to share this one because I found it before starting the video. It seems to come from NCBI, which I believe is PubMed, medical cannabis laws and suicides by gender age. And while we know from this Harvard study in 2014 that when you legalize cannabis, whether for medicinal or recreational, I believe it's just medicinal then, but opioid overdoses go down by 25%. If that's not a massive victory for public safety that should be printed on all media outlets, I don't know what is, right? But this is just another example of why if you cared about public safety and you wanted to save lives, cannabis would have been descheduled decades ago, as the estimates suggest that the legalization of medical cannabis was associated with a 9.2% to 10.8% decrease in the suicide rate of men aged 20 through 29 years old. It's kind of fucking heartbreaking, and a 9.4% to 13.7% decrease in the suicide rate of men aged 30 through 39 years. This is straight criminal, keeping cannabis in the CSA when this is true. And so on top of that, with all the demonization that men face, with all the bullshit propaganda spewed about how toxic masculinity is, men turning to get love from the cannabis plant, because if you don't have a quality woman, it's better to get love from the plant and work on yourself so that you become the person that you want to be, as opposed to settling with someone that you don't want to be with and then having dead bedroom or whatever the fuck you want to call it. And so with that marijuana moment, Nevada legislature tells Congress to legalize cannabis through newly passed resolution, which we do love to hear again, but don't hold your breath because it hasn't led to anything in the past. And so this is the next steps, apparently. You can pause to read there if you're interested, but I just want to relay, I love what Nevada's doing. The legislature has made it crystal clear with the passage of AJR 8, and that intent conforms to the Nevada Constitution. Cannabis has medical value and does not belong on Schedule 1 of the Controlled Substances Act. I love those individuals in Nevada that have the balls to make this happen and speak the truth here. And then, so just whether Congress chooses to act is a decision they must make, but the voices of Americans are quite clear, and Nevadans, and the intent of this legislature are without ambiguity. He said, ambiguity. Nevada remains a national leader in cannabis reform. That you are, and again, hopefully that can be somehow used as a precedent somehow. We're waiting out for some miracles. But with that, on to MSO News. Verano announces the opening of ZenLeaf Pittsburgh McKnight, the company's 17th affiliated Pennsylvania dispensary and 128th retail location nationwide. And so company's 17th affiliated dispensary in Pennsylvania and 6th retail location in greater Pittsburgh area, joining existing local outlets in Cranberry, Monroeville, New Kensington, Pittsburgh, Robinson, and Washington. The dispensary is based in Allegheny County, the second largest county in Pennsylvania with a population of over 1.2 million. 12 would be great, but 1.2. Verano's active operations span 13 states now, comprised of a total of 128 dispensaries and 13 cultivation and processing facilities with more than 1 million square feet of cultivation capacity. And so you can pause to read for a bit more here. If you're interested in Verano or learning more, you can grab the link. We'll get another Twitter Spaces coming up for this week, this time with Kim Rivers, CEO of Trulieve. And she's been quiet for a while. While we appreciate her efforts with DAMA and getting them to amend their testimony, I'm very much looking forward to hearing how they plan to integrate and cut costs with the Harvest acquisition that they made a few years back to get back to cash flow positive and like 60% margins that we love Trulieve for in 2020 and 2021. And so they'll discuss key priorities and long-term strategy. I do look forward to this. And if you missed the one from last week on Wednesday, he spoke with Boris Jordan, executive chairman of Cureleaf. And so I will try and find the recording and put the link in the comments so that you can easily grab that. And so set a reminder for this if you're interested, but I am a shareholder in Trulieve, so I do want to be tuning in to hear for that. But with that, on to Florida Office of Medical Cannabis Use for this past week. We can see, they've added some stuff here. Pause to read this if you're interested, but just going to go through what I usually do. The dispensary is approved for this week from May 22nd to the 26th. Air Cannabis Dispensary in Winter Park, and then MUV in Zephyrellis. And so MUV backed by Verano. Air Cannabis is obviously Air Wellness. And so 2 new dispensaries opened this past week, while their qualified patient count did increase to 820,823, which represents week-over-week increase of 2,144. So nice to see it back over that 2,000 mark. But with that, dispensations from May 15th to the 25th. So sales for this past week, all the MSOs operating in the state, the number of dispensing locations that they have, or dispensaries in operation, and then this past week, the number of milligrams of THC sold, milligrams of CBD sold, and ounces of smokable flower. And so this is a great resource to keep tabs on. I will provide it every week, but at the same time, appreciate connoisseurs.io for taking all this information and putting it into some nice visuals for us, as the Florida OMMU weekly update for May 19th to the 25th, 2023. So you can pause to read flower, THC, CBD. We've got the leaders by market share here. And then just going to go into the images so that you can take a look. This one is for total flower sales, ounces by company for this past week. Total THC sales, milligrams by company this past week. Total CBD sales by company this past week. And total dispensing locations by company. That doesn't change nearly as quickly as the other ones do. And then, so with that, more state news, marijuana moment. Thank you for sharing. As Maryland officials release draft cannabis rules to prepare for legalization this summer. And so glad that we have Maryland coming online this year. That panel will need to review and approve the emergency regulations, which will also be published in the Maryland Register before they're enacted. But the relatively quick turnaround with the proposed regulations is another sign that Maryland intends to have a recreational market up and running in time for the implementation of voter-approved legalization on July 1st. And so just good to see Maryland working towards getting this online sooner than later, as opposed to what we saw out of, say, New York and New Jersey. And the 41-page draft rule sets definitions, codifies personal possession limits, lays out responsibilities for regulators, explains licensing protocol, including for social equity applicants, clarifies enforcement authorities and penalties, and outlines packaging and labeling requirements. And so if you're interested to learn more about Maryland, grab the link in the description, and I think there's a link to the draft rules that I'll also put in there as well. And then so with that, on to this news from Minnesota. State agency set target to begin issuing retail licenses for cannabis. And so while Minnesota, I think we're still waiting on the governor to sign this, that will make them the 23rd state to legalize. And while they're anticipated to do that and plan to be the 23rd state, this is very unfortunate to hear that the estimated start of cannabis sales from dispensaries is listed as January of 2025. Although that could shift. So we're hopeful they'll do something similar to Maryland, where Med would switch over to rec and be able to start supplying that first, because why would you not want regulated cannabis being distributed, safe, tested products, as opposed to letting the gray market run rampant until 25? But obviously the benefits of no longer criminalizing people and allowing home grow, that's what Minnesotans are here for. And so good for you guys there. With that, from Tom Angle, bipartisan Ohio reps Jamie Callender and Rep Weinstein filed a bill to legalize cannabis. And so Ohio, good to see this state trying again. Ohio and Pennsylvania seems to be continuing to make efforts through the legislature, but the legislation comes as activists are collecting signatures to place a cannabis legalization initiative on the November ballot in 2023. And so a bit more here if you just wanted to pause to read some of the details of it, but of course, full link in the description. And so while it is early, though, I want to update you once they make a bit more progress on this. Hopefully they will. But with that, another one from connoisseurs.io summarizing New York's joke of a social and economic equity plan from the Office of Cannabis Management, as they've now published it out in the open. Now it makes sense why they haven't shut down the illicit stores. What a mess. New York basically wants to use medical operators, MSOs, conversion fees to adult use to transition what they'll call legacy operators, or as defined in layman's terms, your street drug dealer or illicit store, to a legal social equity license business. So I'll put the link to the report in the description, but they're not even trying to hide it. As get this, create a pathway for legacy operators to transition to the regulated market, as people trust community legacy dealers. Yeah, they might trust their old dealer, not the 1,400 random stores that are popping up. Again, these are straight criminals, and the law does not matter in New York anymore. We should utilize them to make connection to community, as minority-owned businesses are often small businesses, and of course, these are the mom-and-pop shops that want to open legal stores. They've only got, 7 or 8 legal stores open, so think of how many New Yorkers are still stuck waiting on this bullshit, yet they're telling them, yeah, no, we want to give you a chance. We're just focusing on social equity so that all of you become equally poor and that none of you can end up benefiting except for us who collect our paychecks for doing such a terrible job. And then with that, just to highlight, legacy operator refers to long-standing participant in the unregulated market of cannabis or marijuana whose operations predate legalization of March 31st, 2021. So legit. A legacy operator in New York, by definition, is in the black market, the gray market, whatever you want to call it. While registered organization refers to an entity that is registered under Article 3 of the cannabis law that is authorized to manufacture and dispense medical cannabis in New York State. Registered organizations are the ones providing a safer, non-addictive medicinal alternative legally through New York, and they're the ones being punished. It's fucking infuriating. My God. But then get this. The office's incubator program initiatives will be supported by fees derived from the transition of registered organizations, remember those are the MSOs providing medical, to the adult use market. So they want the MSOs to pay $20 million each, and that's going to fund. This section identifies additional work being done by the office to support entrepreneurs. And yeah, that would fund the CAURD applicants. Infuriating. And so in the near term, another thing that New York has decided they're going to try out is New York introduces cannabis farmers markets to unclog the legal cannabis oversupply problem from letting the gray market run rampant. And so just a quote from here, Brad Racino, thank you for sharing. A minimum of 3 growers and a retailer can organize events where growers can sell flower and pre-roll. And do so through a retailer, but of course not the registered organizations that are actually selling a safer, non-addictive medicinal alternative to a lot of more harmful drugs out there. No, just the legacy operators or your friendly neighborhood dealer, and at non-storefront locations. So go sell it at a park. Go sell it near schools. You cannot make this shit up. And while this might be one way to deal with the oversupply issue, again, this is not safe tested product that comes through, the legal market. We don't know what can go into these products. And so for all these politicians saying, oh, untested cannabis is the problem. Yeah, and that's a product of prohibition and the status quo, right? And so again, great, they're not criminalizing, but why would you want to even join the legal market when it's much more profitable to just operate illegally? And New York is just facilitating that. It's nonsense. So full link in the description. And then this was another interesting one from SF Gate out of San Francisco. More than 90% of California pot farms infected with severe pathogen. More than 90%. Sounds like a big deal, and it sounds like we'd be hearing more of this, but at the same time, they don't discriminate between, are these illicit operators and farms, or are these legal grow operations. Like, they don't specify. An infectious pathogen inside California's pot farms, that's all they say, California's pot farms, is attacking cannabis plants and growing in visibility for months, only to spoil crops just as farmers are ready to harvest. This would be great if this is all black market cannabis. Thank you, God. Scientists believe that it's in nearly every pot farm in the state. How would scientists know this? It could be causing billions of dollars in damages to the national weed economy. I just think this is poorly written, and there's just so much nuances that's left out. They don't discriminate between illicit or legal. Scientists from who and where believe that nearly every pot farm in the state could be infected. Like, again, would be great if these are the black market operators. Hence, the prices of legal cannabis would then go up, but I just don't know. So just figured I'd share it. You can grab the link if you're interested in learning more. But with that, just to highlight some of the shenanigans going on with Canadian LPs. This was late last night. Canopy Growth announces, imagine that, late on a Friday night. It was 4:30. I saw it on a Friday night. But anyways, announces voluntary application for a management cease trade order. And so I'm not going to try and pretend like I really understand what this is. I tried to read through the whole thing, and then when I realized that this is one full sentence, it's like, okay, gosh, bear with me. But essentially, it seems like what Verano had to do by restating some of their past filings, it seems Canopy has to do that for matters relating to BioSteel sports nutrition. And so, interestingly enough, things can't get any worse for the Canadian LPs. They seem to be doing so, and hopefully this is a sign that we're close to bottom. And so just wanted to share this, though, because it is obviously means something and highlights the difference, again, between just the management we see on the Canadian side versus the execution, despite having both hands tied behind their backs on the US side as well. And so just note this is a Canadian LP and not an MSO having to do this, although we've seen MSOs have to do this in the past. Well, figured I'd share this one from Toronto Star. At least in Canada, the Competition Bureau recommends changing THC limits for edibles and easing pot packaging. And so obviously, if they wanted to sell more edibles, allow 100 milligram edibles as opposed to just 10 milligram edibles. It's not rocket science, no shit. But so it seems like in 2022, a survey from Health Canada found nearly half of the 10,000 plus respondents who used cannabis in the past year purchased the substance exclusively from legal sources, an increase of 43% in 2021. And this is something to be proud of. When you have legal outlets to supply the demand, people will go to the legal stores. They like to know what they're buying, if possible. And so a bit more here if you wanted to pause to read. But I think the main changes would be stakeholders have told the Bureau increasing the limit to 100 milligrams could make edible cannabis products more appealing to consumers, especially those currently sourcing them from the illicit market, because they'd be cheaper at the illicit market and you're getting bang for your buck. While the Bureau suggested easing restrictions on cannabis promotion, packaging, and labeling would also give producers more room to innovate and help consumers make more informed purchasing decisions. And it would help, to end the discrimination, treat it more like beer, because it's safer, healthier, and it'd be better if more people turn to cannabis than to alcohol. And with that, more Canadian LP shenanigans as TLRY Brands Inc. announces pricing of registered offering of $150 million of unsecured convertible senior notes. So again, a lot of financial blabble. Apparently this means it'll help refinance a meaningful portion of their debt that is due in June 2024, and it extends their debt maturity to 2027 at a lower fixed interest rate of 5.20. So pays some debt and kicks more down the road, which is beneficial. Strengthens balance sheet with additional cash proceeds of $15 million or $37 million if over-allotment is exercised in full to be used for strategic acquisitions and to pay down debt, while brings the company's current cash equivalents, and marketable securities on hand to approximately $440 million. And so this is what they share with you in the highlights, but what they don't tell you is what you have to find, or what you have to dig a little bit deeper to find for yourself. But so get this, in connection with the company's offering of the notes, the company entered into a share lending agreement with an affiliate of Jefferies LLC, one of the investment firms I share snippets of sometimes. They are the share borrower, under which it will lend to the share borrower. TLRY will lend 38.5 million shares of the company's common stock. But then get this, the company expects that the selling stockholders will use the short position created by such sales to establish their initial hedge with respect to their investment in the notes. The company, TLRY, will not receive any proceeds from the expected sale of the borrowed shares from the note purchasers. And so while this might help them reduce their debt, sure, give away 38.5 million notes that can be converted into equity that will dilute existing shareholders, and why not short the hell out of the company? And that's why on Friday the share price went down by 20%. Again, I don't see that as a win in the near term, but is that setting up some sort of short squeeze? We'd love that to be the case, but probably not if Jefferies is knowingly buying the shares. And so just shitty to find out more and more shenanigans as a retail investor. There's little that we can do. Just a reminder that cash is king. But isn't it ironic that the MSOs that are much fundamentally healthier and arguably have much better management have such a harder time raising capital just because because they're continuously discriminated against and stuck on the pink sheets because of the federal overhang. Where in Canada, because cannabis is federally legal, these companies can uplist on major exchanges, get easy access to debt and institutional money, and just like that, keeps them alive in the water. So fascinating times. I do think MSOs will get their day, though, no doubt. And Italians to enjoy medical cannabis offerings from one of the biggest cannabis companies in the world. You'd think it'd be talking about an MSO. Well, of course it's not. It's Tilray Brands announced that its medical cannabis division, Tilray Medical and FL Group, the company's subsidiary in Italy, have received authorization from Italy's Ministry of Health to distribute 3 new medical cannabis compounds. And it certainly sounds promising, as Tilray also announced a new strategic partnership with Pharma Idea, a Petroni Group company, to market and educate over 12,000 pharmacies across Italy on the benefits of medical cannabis and medical patient care. And so no doubt this is almost more important than the money in the near term, of course, expanding the knowledge of medical cannabis and helping normalize it, but it's worth considering. I forget the numbers exactly, so I don't want to butcher this too much, but when Germany announced that Tilray would be supplying them, Tilray was only exporting I think 4,000 kilograms or something like that, but it was just a much smaller amount of cannabis than you'd expect. And so when you think, oh, well, if Tilray is supplying to Germany and Italy, that's going to help their bottom line and show up on their comprehensive income statement, it hasn't really done that in the past. And so again, while this is promising, taking more of a longer term outlook on that. So more on this article. Actually, you can just scroll down if you want to pause to read. Otherwise, you can grab the full link, but I think that covers it. And then last bit, just to round off from Cannabis Health, Iceland proposed pilot project could permit use of medical cannabis. If approved, the 4-year pilot project is expected to begin in January 2024. And so fortunately, you don't have to wait too long for this one. And it seems like they're taking some pages from what we've seen in Switzerland, possibly, and other places. And so love to see this potentially happening in Iceland. And so you can pause to read this bit if you're interested. The bill would need to be presented by the ministry by the 31st of December. With the 4-year pilot program expected to begin the following day, January 1st, 2024. And so pause to read if you're interested, and then a little bit more down here if you wanted to pause to read as well. Otherwise, you can grab the full link in the description. But that is it for today's episode, folks. I want to thank you so much for tuning in, and I really hope you got some value out of it. What did you think of the stories mentioned? Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions, and I'd be happy to try and address them. But besides that, if you enjoyed this video and you learned something, please just leave a like on it. Subscribe below if you don't want to miss any future videos, and I will catch you on Wednesday for a midweek update. Have a great weekend, everybody. Take care.